anniversary of a death. George Floyd was murdered a year ago today. So please join Pastor Mashad Evans as he leads us in a moment of reflection.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Or good afternoon, good evening, whatever. It's a beautiful day with which we have been blessed, and as we enjoy this great weather in downtown Ann Arbor, our attention turns to the incidents of this time last year. As Ms. Jackson has shared, my name is Mashad Evans. I pastor Bethel AME Church, one of the oldest historically black congregations here in Ann Arbor. And don't worry, there will be no sermon tonight. We're here to talk about public safety, but we certainly want to reflect on the incidents of a year ago today. From 1920 until 1938, every time they heard the news of a lynching, the staff of the NAACP would hang out of their window in their Fifth Avenue offices in New York City a flag which reads, "A man was lynched today." That was over 100 years ago that practice began. And it continued until their landlord said that they could no longer wave that flag outside of the window because it was too salacious, it brought too much attention. Here we are 100 years later, having some of these same conversations. 100 years later, we're dealing with some of the same issues. And as we gather here in this place tonight, it's not that these incidents are new, the things that we have heard or experienced through George Floyd or the many others or the nameless black and brown men and women who have died. But we're part of a tradition, a legacy. We're the warriors that shouldn't be fighting this battle because it's been going on for over 100 years. So tonight, as we gather here in beautiful downtown Ann Arbor, a city that has its own challenges. Yes, we are blessed, we are privileged in so many ways with so many resources, but we're still fighting this battle. A battle that started more than 100 years ago, but continues today. So as part of our reflection, and I understand all of us come from various faith traditions or no tradition at all, I'm going to invite you just to center yourselves for just a moment, and in the midst of the hustle and the bustle of rush hour, find a posture, a position where you can be relaxed and comfortable. And if you feel safe enough, just to close your eyes for just a moment. When I ask that you would take a deep breath, and as you breathe in, remember the lives that were lost, the countless lives that were lost, men and women that were lynched. As you breathe in yet again, the mothers and fathers who have lost children, the sons and daughters who have lost parents. As you breathe in yet again, reflect on the anger and the anguish and the grief and the pain carried by so many millions of men and women. As you breathe in yet again, realize your responsibility, our responsibility, regardless of our color, our creed, our nationality, our ethnicity, our religious affiliation, our preference, our persuasion, that we all are part of this battle, that we all are part of this fight. And as you breathe in one last time, as part of this reflection, be filled with the optimism and the hope that days like today bring. That while we have lost our brother, our friend in George Floyd, and so many others, that has spurred a movement, a change, a catalyst for something greater, something newer, something better. Hopefully we'll move to the day that we're no longer waving those flags, no longer having these gatherings, no longer in this place of pain, but rather moving toward a place of peace. Amen and amen.
Thank you so very much. So I'd like to officially call the May 25th, 2021 meeting of Ann Arbor's Independent Community Police Oversight Commission to order. Ms. Janess, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, I shall. Commissioner Ameri, Commissioner Billups, present. Commissioner Conwell, Vice Chair Tadoro Hargrave, present. Commissioner Walton. Chair Jackson.
Present.
Commissioner Chip. Commissioner Evans. Commissioner Altman.
Present.
Commissioner Birch. Commissioner Carter.
Here.
Councilmember Song. Councilmember Ramwali.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Do you want to do your thing first?
Sure, we can add it.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Othman.
I would like to make two motions for this meeting. The first motion is to appoint the chair and vice chair for the Police Oversight Commission. And the second motion is to also appoint speaker of the commission. If we don't have the vote today, we could also vote on tabling those motions for next meeting. Let's make a motion to table those two motions.
So moved.
Okay. Okay. Anyone for? Say yay.
That's fine, you do it.
Anyone against? Motion carried. The two motions will be motion on next meeting in June. Thank you.
So this meeting is structured as a public forum, and what we'd like is for people to come to the mic and talk about their vision of public safety for Ann Arbor, what you envision, what you'd like to see. And I thought I'd start us off with a statement. My name is Lisa Jackson. As the chair of Ann Arbor's Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, just let me say how good it is to see you all in person again. We haven't been in person since June of last year. And it's been a long time since we've been able to meet like this. And I'd like to acknowledge all of you for joining us tonight. Whether you're a regular to our meetings, someone involved in local government, a member of our police department, or if this is your first time hearing from our commission, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for showing up for your community, because at the end of the day, that's how things get better. As we all know, today marks 1 year since George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. And as I prepared for this evening, I spent some time reflecting on everything that's happened. Not just what's happened in this last year since George Floyd's death, but also on the years leading up to it. From Trayvon Martin's death in 2012 to the beating of Rodney King in 1991. I turned to the writings of those who had seen these events play out before they even happened, and found a quote from James Baldwin that I wanted to share with you today. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. What Baldwin means when he says that is that we cannot hope to change the world we live in until we find the courage to face even its impossibilities. Change seemed impossible in a world where the officers who beat Rodney King were acquitted. And change seemed even further away when George Zimmerman was found not guilty of murdering Trayvon Martin. But we persisted in facing the impossible. That's why Derek Chauvin was convicted last month for murdering George Floyd. As we move forward from that moment, one in which we were finally able to breathe just a small breath of justice, I want for all of you to carry these words with you. Nothing can be changed until it is faced. What we are facing right now is the potential for a re-envisioning of policing in our community. When we say that we want to create meaningful oversight, and you've heard me say that before, we don't mean that we want politicians to feel comfortable just because an oversight body exists. Meaningful oversight means that the results of oversight actually change the way that policing is done in our city in a way that is just for all of its inhabitants, workers, and visitors. Meaningful oversight means that when a policing mistake is made, it is not obfuscated. Meaningful oversight means that when something happens to you, you feel safe going to the police because you know the police are actually accountable to you. I'd like to share with you 2 opportunities that ICPOC is currently working through to create more meaningful oversight in our community. The first is the institution of specialized unarmed mental health response units for calls that involve someone struggling with mental health issues. It's an issue that's being talked about nationally, but here in Ann Arbor, we don't have to look nationally to understand how important that is. The reason that I'm speaking to you today is because police oversight in Ann Arbor was compelled by Ora Rosser's death in 2014. On November 9th, 2014, police were called to her partner's home as she was undergoing a mental health crisis. Within about 37 seconds of arriving, they had shot and killed her. Police are not properly trained to de-escalate difficult situations involving mental health, and we should not ask them to do so. As things stand, Ann Arbor does not have the resources to have mental health responders dispatched to every situation that requires them, and that needs to change. Though our commission has accomplished a lot over the last few years, it saddens me that we have not been able to change the system to prevent tragedies like the one that created us. But we persist. The second opportunity we're looking to address is the institution of unarmed traffic enforcement. Contrary to popular belief, routine traffic stops are uniquely dangerous to both officers and those pulled over. Why? Because there are situations in which officers are not expecting to use force, and civilians are not thinking about the ways in which their actions could be interpreted as threatening to officers. And that means if an officer suddenly thinks there's a threat, their actions are going to be more extreme and far less considered than if they had gone into the situation expecting to use force. We've seen this over and over again, from Philando Castile, who was shot and killed because he disclosed to an officer that he was legally possessing a gun, to Karan Nazario, an Army officer who was pepper sprayed at gunpoint because police claimed they couldn't read his license plate, to Dante Wright, who was shot and killed by a Brooklyn Center police officer after allegedly being pulled over for a hanging air freshener. None of these situations warranted the levels of force used, and they could have been entirely avoided if the officers had not been able to default to force, instead of simply treating these men with the decency any human being deserves. Other cities around the nation have already begun implementing unarmed traffic enforcement departments. They operate similarly to parking ticket enforcement. While there will still be the option to call armed officers to the scene, it should not be the default for officers to be ready to use their firearms when they are pulling you over for failing to use a turn signal. These changes ultimately benefit our officers as well, and I want to address them directly. Our commission does not exist to punish the police. We appreciate the good work that many of our officers do in our community, and we want to see them appreciated. But we all have to acknowledge that a community in which people think that any encounter with an officer, no matter how trivial, can lead to their death, is not one in which officers can be genuinely respected. Fear is not respect. It is only by taking officers out of situations that they're not equipped to handle and holding those officers who abuse their authority accountable that we can create the conditions for real relationships between the community and the police. Another part of this is giving officers the tools to navigate the difficult situations they face. In some cases, this just means more training, but it also means that that training has to include things we don't often talk about, like how to intervene in a situation when you see another officer doing something unsafe. That kind of training could literally have saved George Floyd's life. Or better de-escalation training for resolving situations without the use of force. I remember a few weeks ago sitting in on a training with the Ann Arbor Police Department where we reviewed the footage leading up to Sandra Bland's arrest. The video showed the officer becoming increasingly upset while Sandra remained comparatively calm. I asked the officers who were training us, all of whom identified the officer's behavior as disturbing, what she could have done to de-escalate the situation as she watched the officer work himself up. You know what they told me? They said there was nothing she could have done at that point to prevent the events that ultimately ended her life. Nothing. That's why training is so important. Officers need de-escalation training, but they also need to learn to de-escalate themselves, not just the public. Because it's unacceptable that an officer's inability to regulate their own emotions can lead to someone dying. I often get asked what our commission does, and I understand why. Our name, the Ann Arbor Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, harkens back to the ideals that led to our creation. The notion that an independent body should exist to oversee the activities of the police. In a moment where pushing for justice feels so important, the act of overseeing can seem like not nearly enough. But that's not the word that I focus on when I think about our work. What's important there is the word community. Because it's never been by one person, one group, or one organization that change has been accomplished. Rather, it's the coming together of different people with different ideas that has allowed us to move past the obstacles in our way. Our commission knows that not everything we face can be changed, but we also know that nothing can be changed until our community, as one just whole, chooses to face it. Thank you. All right, so who's up next? Come on down. If you feel comfortable, tell us who you are.
You can call me Jeffrey Bronze Eagle. I'll be approaching my 70th birthday this year. I was born in Philadelphia in '51. We moved to Monroe County, Michigan in January of '53. I was 13 months old. I started learning about, actually I didn't understand racism until after knowing the neighbors on the farm adjacent to us, their little black dog's name was the N-word. I didn't know anything about it, and I started first grade, and I was hearing it on the playground. Hey, inner, and I'm looking around for the dog. But I grew up in Monroe County, which was a very, very racist town in those days. It was the civil rights years of the 50s and 60s. Every day in your face, you were getting racial epithets or physical attacks. When I started driving in '67, the police, I was fortunate to have met a couple fellas in kindergarten, and I worked for one of their dads 2 years, sophomore and junior year, and saved money and got my own car. 3 months later, out of my junior year, I traded in for a '65 Mustang. I couldn't drive up the highway without a cop going past me, seeing brake lights, U-turn, getting pulled over. And at one point asked, "Is this your car?" So I would get so many tickets, the insurance companies would raise my fees, high risk. And then when I got injured riding as a passenger, the insurance companies brought up my alleged driving record. So what people need to understand is it's a domino effect that starts early on, and then on through your life you continue dealing with racism. And one of the main problems is that my white brothers and sisters a lot don't want to take the time to listen to us. We need good dialogue, because it's not just an issue with the police. We've got to have the community that will step up and do what's right and know when they need to speak to the negative influences in our society. So, I took the Dale Carnegie course and returned to graduate assist. And in that course, they tell you have to earn the right to speak on a given subject or topic. And when you try to just tell of one incident and the response is, "Oh, you need to get over it." No, they need to take time and listen to all of the incidents, and then will they say, "You need to get used to it"? So that's all I say is we all need to be out in the community sharing our stories. We need to be working toward what this country was professed to be in the first place. And part of that is through economics. We've got to start focusing more on our socioeconomic structure. The fact that we have a market structure that sends massive amounts of wealth through it, and it's traveling the world into the pockets of wealthy. So we're way beyond the time to discuss these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No, I didn't.
Who's next?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm Michelle Hughes, and I've got here some stories that I'm going to read from other people. These are people who work with an organization called Unified. They're a harm reduction organization that works with people who use drugs to keep them safe by giving them clean utilities and things that they need to stay safe and reduce the harm from drug use. And so I'm going to read their stories, as many of them as I can get through. Number one, my ex and I were living in our car for a while. Every day, we used to go sit in the parking lot behind a coffee shop and use their Wi-Fi. So one day, we're just sitting there and two cops come walking up. They never tell us what they're bothering us for. They just pull us out of the car and start running our names and searching the car. Now my ex was driving. She was the one with the license, but her birthday was the day before, and her license expired that day. Thing is, that was a Saturday, and the law says if your expiration date falls on a weekend, you have until the following business day to take care of it. Well, this cop decided he didn't care. He was mad that he couldn't arrest us, so he had our car, and again, this is that we lived in the car, and he knew that. He had our car towed. In essence, he stole our car. He said that the cop was mad because they had rigs in the car, but no dope, and they had their cards on them, but they couldn't do anything. So they used their badge to steal our only shelter in November. Story number two. Oh, and by the way, the reason I'm reading these stories instead of these people telling their own stories here is because they were afraid that there would be cops here, and they get intimidated by the cops and hassled too often, so they didn't feel safe coming here to read these stories themselves. Story number two. I am terrified every time I call 911. Not because of EMS, not because I don't want help, not because I do anything criminal, but because they're gonna hurt my family again. They're gonna do what they can to have my kids taken away as I try to take care of their father, who has suffered from chronic pain from serving in the military. They cut off his medications and treated him like a horrible monster because he has to get dope now instead of being treated at the hospital. The police came once for his overdose, and 2 days later CPS was at our door telling the kids their father almost died. The kids were not home at the time and learned about the incident from someone trying to take them away. They were 4 and 7 years old. This wasn't their place, and they created more trauma. Story number 3. The shelter kicked us out. It was cold, and he had nowhere to go, so my friend and I sat together in an alley. Someone called the police, and as I nodded out, they took me to the hospital, saying I was a junkie overdosing. My friend who had the dope on him, used up, was still arrested for having rigs on him. When I left the hospital, because they treated me like shit, not realizing I had nowhere to go and was starving, I went back to the alley, hoping my friend was there waiting. My friend wasn't, but I saw police waiting and watching that area, laughing about it being a junkie hotspot and easy bait. Story number 4. A volunteer from a harm reduction program was passing out sterile supplies. The police decided it was a good idea to give a paraphernalia citation and confiscate the supplies. Number 5, hiding rigs is normal. The police will mess with you for protecting yourself and others. If they want to stop diseases, stop charging us for being safe. Number 6, when you're constantly watched, no help, and hiding to not be sick, it's a slap in the face when the police get money to solve problems that they created. Number 7, the officer was nice when he came by himself and asked if I was all right after an overdose. Then his buddy came and the vibe changed. I was told next time to do society a favor and do a bigger shot. I was clean for 6 years, lost my mother to suicide, and used to help the pain. They called me names and even spit on me. Filing a report means getting it worse next time. So that's what I've got for you from the people of Unified. You can go to miunified.org. That's their website. Thank you. Oh, and I also have a podcast, and there's an episode in which we interview people from Unified. The podcast is called Ann Arbor AF. So if you want to hear more about Unified, you can listen to that. Thanks.
I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but if there were legislators from the state who might want to talk about what's happening in terms of perhaps upcoming legislation, we'd be happy to hear about it. Oh my gosh, look! Senator Jeff Irwin.
Thank you, Lisa. I was trying to politely make my turn, but thank you for the invitation. Nice to see so many friends and employers here today. Nice to see you, Bird. Wanted to say hi to you earlier when I saw you walk in. I'm Jeff Irwin. I'm your state senator. I work for all of you in Lansing. And there's a lot going on with these issues in Lansing to update you on. But first I want to say that, for me, this issue has been one I've been working on for several years. When I was first elected in 1999, one of the very first things I did was tour the county jail. And I remember asking Sheriff Ron Scheibel and Under Sheriff Jerry Clayton at the time, why is it that 2/3 of the men in here are black when our community is only 13% black? Doesn't make any sense. And then that stuck with me. I kept asking that question of judges and prosecutors and lawyers in town, defense attorneys. And one of the things that really hit home to me, what the answer was a few years later when I was chair of the County Board of Commissioners and one of our county deputies killed a man in West Willow, Clifton Lee. And when I saw that tape and when I saw the disregard that those people had for that fellow human being that they were laying on top of, I knew that part of the reason why we had this problem in our community was deep structural, institutional racism. And so, ever since then, I've been thinking about what can I do to try to make a difference on this. And there are really 5 things that I've been kind of focused on for the last several years in terms of the work in Lansing, largely derived from Campaign Zero's work. And those 5 things are, first, citizen oversight. We need real, meaningful citizen oversight. And I want to thank every one of you for being here and being a part of this, all of you for being interested in it, and council for creating it. And it needs to get better. But that's the first thing, and that's at the local level. We did that at the county. The city has now done that. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's important that we have that. It's also important that the state model good citizen oversight. And that's why in 2019, when I got to Lansing, one of the first things I did was reach out to the governor and say, Governor, there are a number of things we need to do to improve police here in our state and to restore right relations. And one of the things is citizen oversight. And what the state needs to do is the state needs to step up and model good oversight for our local governments. A lot of this happens at the local level. Most of the police are local, but we've got about 1,000 state troopers. What are we doing with the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards to create some citizen oversight? And as a result of that conversation, maybe 6 months later, we were able to get the governor to change, the situation here in Michigan to add citizen members to the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. So now the commission that decides what training is going to happen, the commission that gets to decide if officers have made a big enough error to get fired, and that's a pretty narrow window. That commission has some citizen members, and we have one of those members here today, Dr. Lisa Jackson. And so I thank you for your service on that board as well. And so, in addition to having great citizen oversight, another thing we need to have is independent investigations. I introduced a bill to say that anytime we have an excessive force allegation, we've got a civil rights abuse, that has to be taken out of the local prosecutor's hands and put into an independent body. I propose that it be handled by the Attorney General. I think that the Attorney General should have a separate sort of public corruption kind of unit that is separated from the politics of the office and that just focuses on these cases to make sure that people have that arm's length investigation. Because no offense to our wonderful prosecutor here, but when the investigation is done by someone locally who has to rely on that relationship with law enforcement to do all of their work, even if they do everything right, even if they have the highest ethical standards, it still doesn't send the right message to our citizens who need to know that that investigation was carried out faithfully, independently, and that's why it should be done by an independent body. I'll try to land this plane. We need to demilitarize the police. That's another thing we need to do. We've been trying to prohibit state or local agencies from working with the federal 1033 program, basically obtaining these military equipments, battering rams, all sorts of crazy stuff. We need to restrict the use of non-lethal technologies like tear gas and rubber bullets, and the fact that when citizens gather to speak out and utilize their right to assemble, that oftentimes they're met by riot police. They're met by gear that is meant to escalate the situation, not de-escalate the situation. So we need to demilitarize. That's number 3. Number 4, and I usually end with this one, we need to end the war on drugs. I can't leave this out. Can't leave this out. The war on drugs was created under racist auspices, and it continues to turbocharge the problems that we have in our criminal justice system. And then finally, I think we need better police training. And I close with this because just today we introduced a bipartisan package of legislation in Lansing. We've been working for many, many months to try to get some agreement with our conservative colleagues on this, because back in 2020, I introduced a police training bill that passed the Senate unanimously on the heels of the murder of George Floyd, but it never made it to the governor's desk. And despite all the activism last year, despite all the things that happened, despite all the people speaking out, the Michigan legislature didn't put a single police reform bill on the governor's desk. And so we need to rectify that this year. After the end of the session, we went to work with our colleagues trying to negotiate what can we get done. And so just a few days ago, we introduced a package of bills. They're going to do a number of things. And one of the bills in the package, Senate Bill 482, is my bill, which improves police training. And it really does it in 2 ways. One, it for the first time creates continuing education requirements for police officers. Every time I say this, I can't believe I'm even saying it, right? I mean, we have all sorts of professions in the state of Michigan that to get licensed, you have to go and get trained every once in a while. I mean, it's for realtors, for architects, for cosmetologists, all sorts of things, but not for police. I just think that's incredibly crazy, and that's why I embodied it in the bill. And then also require that training be better. Require that the training include training to help officers recognize their implicit bias, training to help identify people who are having mental health crisis and how to de-escalate that, and also to help officers understand the mental health crises that they may be having themselves, right? I mean, when you look at the look on Derek Chauvin's face when he was on George Floyd's body, this man was crying for his mother, and this man had this placid face, like all humanity had left his body. Why? Because it had. And we need to make sure that we train our officers to recognize that in their partners, to recognize it in themselves, and to destigmatize officers getting this kind of help themselves, getting mental health treatment themselves. So that's what we've done with the police training bill. There are a number of other bills in the package. I would encourage you to check out my Facebook page or Twitter feed today. I've got all the bills listed, but they do things like, for instance, they didn't include my independent investigation bill, but they did another one that actually sends the investigation to another prosecutor far away in the state. And so, there's some bills on requiring that certain disciplinary records do get disclosed, and it's rather narrow, but it's an improvement. So we're going to keep working on these things. I want you to know that, but I also just want to close by thanking all of you for being here. The only way we can be successful in restoring right relations between our police force and our community is if we're all involved and we're all making sure that we're communicating with our volunteers here and our leaders on council who need to make it happen. So thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry if I went on too long, but you're doing important work. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think it's really important that we think about how we tackle reframing policing, reframing public health, and we have to do that from a wide variety of perspectives. Some of those are legislative, some of those are at the state level, some of those are right here in Ann Arbor, and we have to think nationally as well. We have to think about the George Floyd Policing Act. So there are lots of things that we have to think about as we think about how each one of us can make a difference in thinking about reimagining public safety in Ann Arbor. I doubt that's what they're thinking about right now, but. Anybody else? This will travel, okay. Commissioner Stephanie Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just wanted to say this, and I know our new prosecutor's here and his chief assistant, and I know he's bringing some good things, I think, to the, I don't even know if we call it anymore the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system. But I just had to say this. Today, on the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, I turned on the news and they were interviewing a man who said George Floyd was a drug addict, he resisted arrest, and he got what he deserved. That hurt me so much to hear someone actually say that. I am not really optimistic. I'm on this commission. I want to work as hard as I can, but I'm not optimistic. I know that they tell me that there's at least 25% of the U.S. population who doesn't believe that the election was fair and just, and that Biden is not the president. I'm not optimistic. So what I wanted to say, there's no longer a fence to straddle. People have to speak up. You're either with us or you're with them. And so that's all I wanted to say, because I was so bothered that someone would think that there's the death penalty for whatever it is they said George Floyd did, which has never been proven, and he never had his day in court for anything at all. But that you're with us or you're with them. Thank you.
You know, when Commissioner Carter talks about George Floyd not having had his day in court, she doesn't say that lightly. For those of you who don't know, she used to be in the county prosecutor's office as well. She's also been a defense attorney, so she has worked many sides of the criminal legal system. And I understand how hard it is to remain optimistic at this point. I think it's really challenging to see what's happened. I believe 70 people have been killed by police since George Floyd. 70, at least. I'm sorry, that's probably a few weeks old, so that's probably not the right number anymore, but at least 70. And so it's really hard to think about people marching in the streets last summer for weeks and weeks and on end, hundreds of thousands of people participating, and to see what little movement there's been. Certainly it's a game of inches. And I think Councilmember Rumlawi was chastising me once for not being optimistic. So you guys know I have been pessimistic at times as well. But there are moments when we can see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, a little bit of progress, and I think we hang on those. I am convinced that Ann Arbor can do unarmed traffic enforcement. That is well within our power to do that. It is just whether City Council has the will. That's all. That is something that is entirely within its control. When we think about mental health responses, we coordinate with the county, we coordinate with community mental health at the county level, but policing is within the City of Ann Arbor's purview entirely. And so that is a change that we can make. It is just whether we are willing, whether we are going to push council, and whether council will be moved. Come on down.
I have a quick question. Does combined dispatch with the county make that more difficult to have the social workers respond? Because we have less control over dispatch than we did before it was combined 10 years ago. Sorry.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
Dispatch is still out of the county, but dispatch has the ability to say, hey, in this case, traffic enforcement go, or better yet, traffic enforcement would be out monitoring traffic and checking out what's going on in the traffic. And when they see that person signal with no turn signal, if we have decided as a community that that's something that we would really like to enforce, that we feel like that's a serious safety issue, then we could then have our unarmed traffic enforcement pull people over. We could do that. One of the things that we've done is we are beginning to work with a group under the direction of Kevin Karpiak at Eastern Michigan University to analyze traffic stop data. And other cities that have done that have done interesting things with it. They have looked at where accidents have happened. They have looked at where there seem to be problems in traffic, and they have worked on those areas to sort of alleviate problems that people might be having with traffic enforcement in that area, instead of targeting drivers. And although the county prosecutor, if you want to come down and say it in your own words, has made a statement that they will not be, correct me if I'm getting it wrong here, relying on any pretextual stops, data collected from pretextual stops in looking at prosecutions. Police behavior has been what it is for some time. And so if you see that happening, it's unlikely to change overnight. But part of that can be eliminated by taking that purview away from the police in terms of stops. So that's something that's within Ann Arbor's control, and something that, if council has the will to do it, can be done. Anybody else with a question, an idea, a concern, something you'd like to see? If you feel comfortable saying your name.
Yes. My name is Odile Huguenot-Heber, and I have been a nurse, a registered nurse for about 30 years. And when you are a registered nurse, often you work with the cops. But I came to Ann Arbor 25 years ago, and before that I was involved with Campaign Against Apartheid in Berkeley. And we started something called Cop Watch. And Cop Watch was a group of citizens that witnessed what was happening on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, mostly the weekend, because that's when most of the arrests took place. And we were there witnessing and just on the spot and noticing which officer did proper work, which one didn't do work. And what we want is the police to be of help to the people, like they are when they bring wounded people to the ER, to the emergency where I used to work. We want them to be of help, not to be attacking people because they think this person doesn't have the right ID or this person doesn't act quite right. This is not good. They need training, they need systematic training, and they also really need people who live in the city to care about that. Because if nobody cares, it's not going to change. And I am a little saddened because I was part of the group of people that initiated the Police Review Commission and came there for a year about in meeting, or a year and a half in meetings, and we didn't see much change. So I got kind of hopeless about it. And I think if we want to see a change, we have to go to our next door neighbor. We have to speak to a lot of people. And it's possible in Ann Arbor to do it. It's possible. It's one of these communities where we could have, excuse me, where we could have an exemplary police review commission and police. So it's my dream that we have people who care about people. Thank you.
Who else has a question or a comment or an idea?
I'll go.
Come on down. Commissioner Micaiah Shipp.
Hi everybody, I'm Micaiah. If you didn't know, I'm a student here at the University of Michigan, just finished my freshman year. I just wanted to come up here because I've been hearing a lot about lack of optimism. And it's really just striking a chord with me because I completely understand. And my family around me is the exact same way. Nothing will ever change. We've been doing this for too long. This is so regular for people. It's so normal. nothing will ever change, especially because my family is black. This is what they know. They have encountered police, and I think a lot of what people say is, like, non-black people, when they see black people say, I'm tired of this, you know, I don't think they understand that mothers have conversations with their kids, like, when they're really young, and tell them about what it will be like when they have an interaction with the police. I've had the conversation. I'm sure many black people in the audience have had the conversation, been told to them. My brothers had the conversation. Everybody in my family's had the conversation. Make sure your hands are right here. Make sure your ID is somewhere in sight. Make sure you don't move until the police officer comes to the window. Make sure this, make sure that, make sure this, make sure that. And these are conversations that I'm not sure that non-black people don't have with their kids. And it's sad that those conversations have to be had in the first place. And when I think about lack of optimism, when we talk about organizations that are already in place to try to think about reimagining policing in the future, will those organizations work? Will they follow through? Will people continue to be committed even though they get pushed back time and time again? I want to say that you guys can be optimistic just a tad bit until my generation comes through. Because we have plans. We have true plans, and if we don't work out, then you can just throw the towel. But I think we have plans. There are people like me that are on this campus that are working from the ground up. We don't start right here because nobody's going to listen to you. We've learned that the hard way. Nobody is going to listen to you. Nobody's going to hear you out. You start from right here. That comes from small stuff that people think doesn't matter. So things like DPSS on campus, that needs to be assessed as well. And nobody pays attention to it because, oh, it's not AAPD. Nobody cares, right? It's not that important. It's equally as important because those are the people that are also interacting with students and regular people on campus that are not even students. People have PTSD from police interactions, and nobody believes it. I've had interactions with police as a kid, and it's still, every time I see a police officer behind me, I get a little bit nervous. Every single time. I'm like, are my hands in the right place? I've been driving. I know how to drive. I'm like, is my blinker on? Am I about to turn? I'm not about to turn, but I'm still nervous. And I'm not sure, like I said, that that's the reality for everybody. And it shouldn't have to be the reality for everybody. It shouldn't be the reality for anybody. And so I just want to say that when you think about maintaining optimism or grabbing some a little bit, if you've lost it all, I hope that you can do so for our generation, because if nobody else is working, then I am.
Go ahead. Come on down. And it is true. That is why I think we persist, right? Because we know we will leave this in better hands. We know that our grandparents persisted, our parents persisted. And so we will, in fact, persist. We're not just going to dump it on your hands either. We're going to do a little work before we do that. Come on down, if you feel comfortable.
My name is Deborah Green, and I just want to say to you, every generation of Michigan Black students takes the football a little farther down the field. So thank you very much for picking it up and doing that. Many, many, many years ago, as in the 1970s, I was the director of an organization which is the umbrella over a crisis center called Drug Help. I don't know if there's anybody here old enough or long enough to remember that, but Drug Help, we actually had an agreement with the police department for a flying squad of drug crisis workers to go along with the police on runs if they knew that they were running into a situation where drugs were involved, because the police could not keep up adequately with what was on the streets at that point, and our volunteers could. I don't know if there's a model there. We paid those people a minor amount of money, mainly they were volunteers. We do not want to undervalue mental health workers or mediators or anything of that nature, but there might be a model there to work for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so Ms. Green brings up a good point. We're not actually looking to reinvent the wheel in Ann Arbor. We have got great models all over the place, whether they're models like Drug Help that have existed before, or whether they're current models. So the city of Berkeley is doing unarmed traffic enforcement now. I was sharing with some of our council members a resolution from Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where they did kind of a big overhaul of their public safety, and they are hiring a person at the top who is a public health person, to whom the fire chief and the police chief and a community safety chief will report. And then I believe a week ago, this past Saturday, the prior Saturday, they voted that in. And so they'll be redesigning their city in the wake of the killing of Daunte Wright. They got that done in about 6 weeks, I think. We look at Ithaca, New York, that has also decided not to enforce some very minor kinds of infractions. They've decided it's not worth their time and effort, and that those things are sometimes used as a pretext to lead to other things. And so we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We've got lots of good models all over the place that we can pull from. And what we're talking about is finding a combination of things that fit for Ann Arbor and bringing public pressure to bear on City Council to get them enacted. Who's next? Mr. Wilson. One of our commission's predecessors, who served on the task force that brought us to bear. Thank you, sir.
Lisa asked me if I would come out today, and it was an honor to come here. When Orr was killed, I was the Human Rights Commissioner, and the Black Lives Matter and a number of others came and demanded that we have police oversight because we did not have it here in this city. I spent over 4 years working on that. It was extremely frustrating work, but it had nothing to do with optimism. And I just want to remind us that optimism is totally irrelevant. I once heard Rabbi Abraham Heschel say, there's nothing in the Bible that says thou shalt be successful. We're talking about accountability. The reason I put that work in was because I needed to be accountable for my 4 sons, for my 2 grandsons, for my 2 granddaughters, for all of my nephews and nieces. We have a responsibility for more than ourselves. Our responsibility is for each of us. We did not give you all the teeth that you deserve because it was pushback from City Council, straight up. And one of the mistakes that I made, and I pray that nobody here will ever make again, is that I did not know how strong the unions are.
I've learned.
Okay? And I did not know how easily City Council people can be intimidated. I am praying that we will stay all the way through, which means until we die. If we don't get there before we die, it is totally irrelevant. As my granddaddy told my father when he handed him my firstborn son, I have 4, he said, as long as this boy is alive, you cannot die. My grandfather had 6 months of education, but he had enough sense to know that. We are not fighting for ourselves. We are fighting forever. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I think I saw a few hands last time. Who's next? Come on down.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm also a student at Michigan. I'm in public health, and when at our meeting earlier today, when Lisa asked people to come, one of the things that we're always trying to stress is that policing isn't like a politics issue or just a politics issue or just a public safety issue, public policy issue. Like, it literally impacts everything. And like Micaiah noted, people have PTSD from their interactions. It's a health issue, and I share your excitement about the students coming through, and I just wanted to give like the voice of public health, and I don't speak for all of public health, but thinking to what Lisa was saying about we don't need to reinvent the wheel. In Ann Arbor, we're a college town, we have lots of great research and lots of really smart academics, but something that's a bit frustrating is saying like, oh, we need to investigate this more, we need to research this, when there are solutions that exist, and we can act now in a lot of things. Like, we can just do unarmed traffic stops right now, and so yeah, that's just like something I've been frustrated with in academia. And well-intentioned research is great, and we can always learn more. But I'm excited to see people excited to do things right now and stay focused on like tangible goals, and not pushing it off to an investigation or another research project or more money for this. So that was all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is important. I know in Ann Arbor we really value intellect. We love research. I'm a researcher by training, so I think, we could research anything to death, but that's not appropriate here. And to take it back to what Dwight said, what we're looking for is accountability. When police make mistakes, they need to own them. And then they need to come forward and explain to us how they're going to avoid making that same mistake again. In the very near future, you're going to hear more about some of the mistakes of last November, where there was a 911 call for a home invasion, and police responded, but they responded by kicking in the wrong door. And they proceeded into the house, guns drawn, on some women who were not expecting them. There's ongoing investigation and discipline into that, so we haven't begun our work yet, because our investigation will begin when the police are finished. And they're not quite finished yet. Those women, as you may know, sued the city, and there was a settlement in February or March. It's COVID brain, I don't know when it was, but fairly recently. And it wasn't until the lawsuit came to light that a lot of the actions of that night were brought forward. So we'll be looking for accountability. We'll be looking for an understanding of what went wrong and what's being done to correct that. And I think all of us want to feel like if you call the police for help, they'll come. And they won't come unless you call them. And while I can say that, with a little bit of humor, for those women, it was anything but humorous, 11:30 at night, to have police officers creeping up their stairs in their home with guns drawn. And so you talk about PTSD, you guys, these situations aren't hypothetical in Ann Arbor. They're happening here too. And so we have to think about accountability. And we're not expecting police to be perfect, but we are expecting them to be trustworthy. And I think that's a goal to which we can all work. All right, who's next? Come on down. Wait. Okay. You're deferring to her. Okay. And then you're next. Spraying your hands first. Just germs.
Hi, I'm Kathy Griswold. I'm on Ann Arbor City Council. I am here to listen to everyone. I was a social worker in Detroit in the Jeffries Corridor back in '75. And back then, you didn't always call the police. Sometimes you called social workers. That's just how it was done, because we did have a lot of services, and those services have been cut. And I hope that with this organization's leadership, a very competent organization, very competent leader, that we can get this done. And absolutely, we have to have accountability in everything we do. We need accountability on council, and if anyone wants to hold me accountable to what I've said tonight or reach out to me, please do that. Thank you.
I'm Alan Haber. I came to Ann Arbor in 1936. I came to the university in 1954 and became an activist, and I've been such for my life. I went to Berkeley in 1968, became part of the group that worked with the Black Panther Party when they initiated community control of the police. Number one question was subpoena power. Accountability requires that the information hidden by the police is accessible at all times by the people who are the citizen oversight. I don't know whether that has happened here. I don't think that got through. But that is really, for accountability, there has to be freedom of information for the people who are looking for what is going on. I've been particularly involved here on the organization and development of this Liberty Plaza and the parking lot over there as a community commons, a self-managed place. And this place, it's nice to see everybody here, but usually the people who are here are held in great disrepute, and now they're kind of over by the side. It should be they would be all over here. But there is a division in this town, a prejudice in this town, a sense of alienation in community in this town that really needs to be healed and bridged. It's not just a matter of the policing. It's a matter of a sense that this is a community that has all sorts of people, and that this place here, Liberty Plaza, is a place that serves in the absence of a real public program and policy dealing with homelessness, dealing with poverty, dealing with people who are passing through town. This is a living room for a lot of people, and the attitude is that this is a place of problem. I think what we really need to see, and it's in the whole community, is a greater sense of the people who use places are themselves responsible and become not problems, but solutions. If this place and the commons had the sense of self-management, and the people who use it are the people who are really responsible for it and have a sense of pride in it and not being viewed as the problems in it, we'd have a much different situation. And that might even percolate up to the police, sensing that they are dealing with a community that has some integration and some sense of self-management among themselves. Anyhow, I hope you all see that this opportunity to develop the Liberty Plaza, the parking lot there, this whole area is a community commons that really is a place for everybody and a place of the creativity of the community to come forth, not under the control of a corporation that would build a high rise or the government to tell us what to do, but people ourselves saying, how do we make a beautiful place and use our talents all together? And I think if we had more of that sense, it would percolate to the police, a sense that the police too are part of the community and not alienated from it and seeing their badges as something as an authority over, but rather, as Odile said, people who help out. That when the last police chief was being interviewed, or maybe before, I said, well, it seems to me that the mission of the police, like the United Nations said, is the mission of everyone in this world now, if we are going to survive, is how do we create a culture of peace and nonviolence for the children of the world. That needs to be the badge on every police officer. I'm here to help create a culture of peace and nonviolence. That is the mission that we all need to see somehow in whatever we are doing, whether it's police or whether it's social work or nursing or just hanging out. That's what we all need, because we are in a system of war and domination, of money, of power rules, and that is going to destroy this whole society. It is when we just realize what is happening in the climate. If this is not seen as an opportunity for system change, we are just going to be walking like lemmings over the cliff. Anyhow, the culture of peace and nonviolence is what we need for the police, and what we need in the commons, and what we need in the community. And my old experience with the Black Panther Party is the community control of the police actually needs authority, and those are overlooking, and authority means the books are open to the people who are holding accountability. I hope that is the case here, and if it's not, it needs to continue to be the call that what is there in the documents, it's not just when the police get done with their investigation that then the public can take a look at it. Anyhow, thanks a lot. I really appreciate what you're doing here, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Hi, my name is Frank Wilhelm, and I just want to second what Alan just said. Very well done. I just underscore that there is a committee formed by City Council earlier this year called the Council of the Commons, and we are eagerly preparing and working on this space and attempting to do everything that Alan mentioned. And I just want to reiterate that activity. We meet monthly. You can attend our meetings virtually at this point. And I just want to invite everybody to participate and help us make this community a better place. And let's start right at the center of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Come on down. I'm not trying to sound like this is a game show. I'm sorry. Did not mean it like that.
Hello. I was just coming down to say that. Sorry. Oh. I've been thinking a lot lately about what happened with Aurora Rosser in Ann Arbor, and a lot about what's happened with interactions with police. Sorry, with people who are mentally ill, and what happens in these situations. And I just think that we need a different system, because right now the solution to these problems are using handcuffs and weapons and prison cells to deal with these issues, and that's simply just not a solution, and that's not the treatment that these people need. And I think, like, especially in my generation, I experienced that there's a lot of people who, I think we just have more and more of a mental health crisis every generation, and this pandemic has definitely not helped with that. So I'm worried about what's going to happen with these people if we don't have a treatment system that doesn't involve violence. And I just hope that in our upcoming generations we can find a system that works, so that police don't have to handle these situations, and we have better tools with mental health resources and therapists and counselors that we can use to approach these problems instead.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. You know, it's interesting when you talk to police, whether you're talking to patrol officers or the chief, what they say is, you know, we're the only ones open at 3 a.m. So when somebody needs help at 3 a.m., that's who you get. It's not necessarily what they want to be doing. It's not what they've trained to do. It's not what they've signed up to do. But right now, they're the only game in town at 3 or 4 a.m. when somebody has an emergency. And that's something that we can work on in Ann Arbor. Who's next? Come on down. I was not going to say that again. Mr. Summers. Thank you.
So, Dr. Jackson talked about community in the title of the organization. Alan and his colleague talked about what the community can do for the plaza. Pastor Wilson talked about accountability. I want to throw in persistence. If we want the City Council to listen to the Police Oversight Commission, the more people who attend council meetings and do public comments about the value of the Police Oversight Commission, I think Council Member Griswold will say that will strengthen the voice of the Police Oversight Commission in the council. If we want Senator Irwin's package of bills introduced today, well, people should be showing up in Lansing talking about their support, because there are, some 300,000 people in this county, and I don't see enough of my neighbors at the meetings I go to. So it's great that we're all here. We shouldn't wait a year to do it again. We should be coming to meetings and bringing our neighbors and just speaking up and making sure that the council, the county commission, the state legislature understand that there's a lot of interest in strengthening groups like the Police Oversight Commission. Thank you.
Paquel. Good to see you.
See you too. I've been listening to what everyone was saying, and a couple of issues kind of stuck to me. And the whole issue of demilitarization, and also the kind of struggles that are going on. So you have Black Lives Matter, and then you have Asian Americans organizing, and you have Palestinian groups organizing. And I think what we really need to do as progressives is to see the link between all of them. So we cannot talk about demilitarization here so that we are not traumatizing our own people, then send billions of dollars to another country where children are being bombed out. This is all linked. At least for me it is, for my family it is. When my children see that, they are horrified that in the name of us, our tax dollars is being sent out where, so accountability just doesn't stop at our doorstep. So, and I have my baggage because I grew up in another country. I came here for college, so I don't look at things in an American-centric way. Maybe I should now that I live here, but I don't. But I see the link between all of this, and I think if we really can join hands, so we won't be looking at just Black Lives Matter or Asian Americans or Palestinian issues, but we all have coalitions, because after all, we are all fighting for the same thing, right? We want our children to be safe. We want human dignity. We want that money to be spent on food and medicine. And so again, I look at it, and a lot of people ask me, like, you have all this excess vaccine, why aren't you giving it to countries like India? I mean, it's going to come back to haunt us anyway, right? There's going to be a variation, and it's going to come back. So I think we really need to stop looking at an American-centric way and really look at it from a global, internationalist, progressive way. Then I think we'll be more successful. That's all. Thank you.
We can walk and chew gum. We can work on multiple things at a time, and we can understand the connections between things. Because I think I'm one of those people too who thinks that everything is related, right? So I think it is important to tackle things here and here and here and here. And we have to do all of it. But we are persistent, and we know that we have to leave this world a little bit better place than for you young people than when we found it. Who is next? Are you saved? You're saved. You saved them. Are you next? Okay, thank you. If you feel comfortable, tell them who you are.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jeffrey Paquel, and prior to opening a bookstore for 28 years downtown, some of you might recognize me, I worked in the juvenile justice system for about 20 years, mostly as a school principal. And as hopeful as I am with everything that's been said in this wonderful community that we live in, and as many things as we have as plans, and it's such a pleasure to go after Al Haber anyway, I'm somewhat disheartened in one way. I'm disheartened because in 1970, when I started working with the residential treatment center kids, we had the same issues, the exact same issues as we're talking about today. And you know what? We had many of the same solutions. We thought, we talked, we planned, we went to our governors and we went to our councilmen, and we tried to get these things happen. And what we were doing every time, in my opinion, was we were reacting to circumstances. We react to a police brutality. We react to violence, and we want to protect our children and ourselves from these bad reactions, from these things that happen. We have to look towards those beautiful children who spoke up today and those young adults and look at what we can do in the community to go underneath the system and to start building something before we get to the point where the police have to hit us in the head. We have to develop a system through our schools, through our community, just like this park. We have to do much more than that, than reacting to the violence and the discord in this society. We have to find new solutions with our younger people to start. They're our future, and we have to give them a chance. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Councilman, former Ann Arbor City Council member. I served with Sumi, so I couldn't pass up this opportunity because I haven't been out in public in years, and Sumi is certainly still leading the fight. So thank you, Sumi, for being such a great role model. I'm also in Ann Arbor County, and I was kind of dismayed as I was talking with Jeff Irwin back there, watching the people ride by drinking and stuff like that all happily, but when I was in high school, we were down here drinking and we couldn't do so. So, that's the thing about Ann Arbor. It's kind of a dichotomy between the privileged and the less so. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I had great experiences growing up with the less privileged in Ann Arbor. But one of the things that, in my time on council, we talked about the police union. I can tell you, I know council members back in the past accepted PAC money from the police unions here in town. I never accepted any, and I think that's something that if you want to have some moral standard on city council members, make sure that they don't accept any PAC money from our local police union or fire departments. These are the same people that we have to deal with, or have to deal with in contracts. But one of the things that really has changed, I think, policing in the state is back under Engler when they got rid of the residency requirements. And that was the big significant, because back in my day in high school, we knew the officers that approached us to tell us that we couldn't drink in the park. We knew their names, they knew our names. Officer Blake, Officer Devine was the Pioneer School policeman. I mean, I could go on. We knew their children. But that, I think, was one of the number one elements that changed community policing and how we don't understand our police officers and the things that they go through. I've also been, when I was on council, a very big supporter of the police department. I was the only council member that ever attended all of the police academy or the police award ceremonies under Barnett Jones, Chief Jones, and worked quite well with him and John Cito. And I don't want to see our police departments beat on for doing good work. And I think there needs to be a lot of other efforts to make sure that we're well respecting what they do for us. I mean, just not so long ago in my neighborhood, armed robbers went into a house and in the wrong house, and then they went to the next door. But I can tell you, every cop in town was there at 7:30 in the morning, getting the evidence together, calming the little girl, calming all the kinds of people, the neighbors. A lot of people were, very worried about where our neighborhood was going. We had lots of armed robbers out there in our community, our gas stations over at Paquel and Platte. I just returned from Seattle, Capitol Hill, where my father's been living since the late 60s. That precinct on Capitol Hill has got a wall 6 feet tall or almost 8 feet tall of iron blocks around it. It's now a fortress, all because we beat on the police departments and not accepting and letting things go a little bit too far. All right, Capitol Hill was a very vibrant place in pandemic, and post riots is now another place. And I don't want to see our community start going in the wrong direction. We have to maintain good police relations on all sides, and I just want to make sure I put my 2 cents in there, because it is something that is very important to this community, that we be fair and equal and given the opportunity to know what our police officers are doing. Then there was some talk about making council do things. One of the things they can do is take that mental health money tax that they've diverted to other places and put it back to mental health. If you want to talk about mental health and policing, you got to fund it. And where are you going to fund it? Well, what's great, a mental health tax. Why this council decided to divert it is way beyond me. Way beyond me. I find it atrocious, just outrageous. And if you need money for this commission and you want to make some change, get that money, go into a budget so that it's doing the proper work for mental health, if you're going to have people going out in places that, where it could be done. So with that, I think is residency requirements. You did want to ask for ideas about things you could do, right?
Yeah.
Residency requirements, got to do it at the state level, but maybe there's an incentive possibility. We do know that there are communities that do incentivize their police officers to live in the community. And I think Detroit may have had something similar. It is something that we can do. I do believe it also is, the feds may allow it in our Ann Arbor Housing Commission apartments. So there are some things that can be done. And as a former council member, and how many races did I have? At least won 4. I think I ran 10. I even ran for mayor. It can be done, all right? Get some good candidates to run. That's what you got to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think there were some good points in there, and one of them I think applies to something that I've been thinking about in terms of police culture. One of the best ways to change police culture is to reinforce the things you want to see more of, reward police officers who are doing good work, and punish those who aren't. That requires accountability, though. And I was having some sort of pragmatic conversations with some council people who were talking about discipline, and one of the things that we kind of feel like right now is, there isn't much discipline that holds up. Arbitration almost always lowers whatever discipline was given, and so it's really hard to hold police officers accountable as it is now. Legislation, one of the things that we asked for, we asked to be involved in the negotiations for the patrol officers contract, and we were told absolutely not, you can't do that. And then when people started marching in the streets last summer, we got a phone call that said, hey, you guys can look at the contract, you have 72 hours to give us suggestions, because we're about to vote on it on Monday. It was a Friday, right? And I was like, wait, and then I was like, how about no? How about, yes, we get a chance to look at it, but you hold off your vote so that we can actually have some thoughtful kind of, since we finally get to look at it, why are you rushing us now? It did take me a beat, though. At first I was like, okay, and then I was like, wait, that's not right. How about no? And so one of the things we asked for was the end to arbitration for termination. Police chiefs rarely fire anyone, but when they do, they need to stay fired. If a police chief gets to a point where they have to fire somebody, you don't want that person walking around. But we've had arbitration bring police officers back that are on the force right now through arbitration after they had been fired. And so do you think the police chief then wants more officers who walk around emboldened to do what they want because they know if they get fired, they'll get their jobs back? So police chiefs aren't stupid. They learn pretty quickly. Ours is a pretty smart guy. I can't speak for him. I don't ever speak for him. But if it were me, I think I'd think 2, 3, 4 times before I fired anybody else, because I know that they'd get their job back and they'd be, potentially more problematic. And that's already happened at least once in Ann Arbor in the past couple of years. I can't speak to before our tenure, but it is important to think about accountability. Accountability and reinforcement for behavior that we want to see, and accountability and discipline and removal for behavior that is inappropriate. And I think even the fans of the police believe in that. Who else? You're up. You're standing up. You can't be less. Here, spray.
Wow. Well, so good to be out. And my name is Ali Ramlawi, member of City Council, 5th Ward. And I'm the liaison to this commission, and I am so proud and honored with such a heavy responsibility. And I just wanted to quickly just give a thanks to everybody who spoke here tonight. The courage, the honesty, the thoughtfulness, the ideas. I wish we could have conversation like these on City Council. we've done a few things, and I know we're not doing enough, fast enough, but there couldn't be a better experience to have on the anniversary of George Floyd, and to remember him, his family, and all the other victims of white supremacy and police violence and brutality. So just being here right now is really a powerful moment. But at the city level, myself and a couple other council members did introduce a resolution to take the excise tax that comes from the marijuana sales in our community, which totaled nearly $500,000 in proceeds that came back to Ann Arbor, into programs such as unarmed emergency responders, and our city prosecutor also has come forward with a program to use some of that money to help with the expungement and diversion program within the city prosecutor's office. So I think that totaled nearly half of what was allotted to us this year, and then we are planning to use the remaining balance towards the unarmed response plan and program that the city administrator is supposed to come back to city council with a plan for us to look at, and hopefully he's working with all the other stakeholders to come back with a workable plan by the end of this year. And so we are working on things, we're just not working on as fast enough. But even with the contract talks that Dr. Jackson just talked about, the minute ICPOC spoke up, well, council delayed the vote. And we went back and we sharpened our argument, and we got some things. Was it enough? No, but conversations will continue. And I appreciate, a lot of what was said tonight. Former councilman made a good point, and it's not a popular one. But we need to be working more with our police department and our officers who are a part of our community. And right now, it's a very low point, and I don't think anyone's necessarily happy about where we're at right now. But to get forward and to move forward, I think we need to work with the police department on issues that we can solve and not treat them as the enemy. And if we can just, like I said, optimism earlier is just, if I don't feel optimistic about getting anything done, then what's the point of showing up? So, I mean, for me, that's why I choose to stay optimistic about this, because it forces me to come back and work and continue to lead on these issues when it's my turn. So just wanted to say thanks to everyone for showing up. And before I leave, I will also say thanks to former Councilmember Sumi Kalasapathy, who brought up the whole idea of how this is all interchanged. All Martin Luther King talked about when he talked about Vietnam and the poverty and everything else. And that was before my time, before I was even born. So, thank you.
Thank you. You know what I think? I do understand optimism, and we'll try to hang in there and be optimistic for you young people, but optimism is not necessary. And a lot of us don't have the luxury of only being persistent when we're optimistic. So I persist, whether I'm optimistic or not. Commissioner Sarah Birch.
Thank you, Lisa. So my name is Sarah, also in Ann Arbor County, born and raised here. Parents went to Pioneer in Huron. And I also work at U of M, where I had sat on their Advancing Public Safety Task Force to look at DPSS, because it was brought forth by the students that it needed to be addressed and evaluated how they were policing campus. And DPSS is this large umbrella that oversees Michigan medicine, all parts of campus, even non-sworn officers. And so we definitely looked at and evaluated all of that. And in working with outreach, reading close to 500 surveys. There were public forums, let out focus groups with parents, community members, students, staff. And what became very clear is that there are two definitions of public safety that exist. For the Black and brown students, public safety is their mental health and their body, the worry and anxiety. That the public safety that needs to be reformed is, how are these officers talking and interacting with the students? Why are, for suicide, mental health calls, like the concern on not calling DPSS because you don't know if an armed officer is going to show up, or you're at a party and your friend is really sick. The fear around not knowing if you're going to get in trouble or if they're going to get taken away. And so this lack of transparency and just the lack of communication and not elevating and centering these voices and these experiences is something that we tried really hard to put forth and center in our report. Because there is a student advisory board for DPSS, but not a single student of color sat on that advisory board. And I met with them and I asked them, what is the number one concern of students on campus when it comes to public safety and DPSS? And they felt that it was how the police are perceived. It was just very devastating that it wasn't even on their radar or being communicated to DPSS that it is the safety, these feelings of fear, the paranoia, the feeling like you just can't safely get home at night because you're just not sure if you're going to be stopped and then something could occur. And so I really hope, what comes of this task force report and continued conversations like this is that visibility on these two definitions of public safety that exist, and that the officers are aware of that and that they're trained, and that the accountability is sweeping and broad. So I just want to say that.
It's such hard work that you guys did, the labor that you put in. I know people on the task force who preceded us can speak to that, but your process was really thorough, and I know it was hard sometimes to center the voices of young people in that, because there were other groups who wanted to have input about what public safety should look like at the university, even though 40,000 of the folks there are young people. But thank you so much for doing that work. We were so happy you were on that task force because as an oversight professional, you were very qualified, uniquely qualified among your peers actually to do that. So thank you. Anyone else? Come on down.
I wanted to speak a little bit to what Commissioner Birch just said in regards to the consequences of what it's like to have that sort of relationship with public safety officials, mostly police, as a decreasingly young person, but also as a person of color. Sorry. I was not raised in Ann Arbor, or I was not born in Ann Arbor, but I was raised here. I went to University of Michigan and had a number of interactions with police officers that were brusque, not inspiring of a lot of affection. But I had one encounter in particular that sticks with me to this day that was especially disturbing. I remember actually just over there by that parking lot next to the bus station, I was walking to the bus to go home down Packard, and I very distinctly remember watching the stop bus. There was the driver of the bus with a police officer standing next to him, and they were watching this woman disembark from the bus. She was the last woman off, and she was visibly shaking. She seemed under the influence of some kind of substance, was not steady on her feet, looked not very... She looked like she had been through a lot and visibly disheveled, and it was disturbing to me as someone who was probably at the time like 25 or something, like someone needed to intervene and do something. And I kind of stood there for a moment, surprised, and I looked over at the officer, who was right in front of her. And I watched him kind of get her off the bus and then just sort of watch her walk past him as she stumbled into the parking lot towards William in that liquor store over there. And he did not turn and watch her walk. He did not check to make sure that she did not trip and fall as the sidewalk turned into gravel and into the parking lot eventually. Did not see that she made it safely across the street. It is not comfortable for someone who looks like me, who does not feel super great about interacting with police officers, especially those who do not seem to care a lot about other people. This woman was white, for example, and so I would expect that he would give her a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than myself. But to see him not even turn as she stumbled across the parking lot was disturbing in a way that I had not, even to that point, felt about my own interactions with the police. And so I actually walked up to the officer and I said, "Hey, I don't think that woman is okay," as if to suggest that maybe he, as a person in position of authority, should intervene in the situation and try to help her. And I will never forget the way he looked at me and just sort of shrugged his shoulders. He did not turn to see where the woman was. She was about halfway across the parking lot at this point. It was about 5 o'clock, so it's rush hour. So if she gets much further, she could stumble in the street and get hit by a car. And he didn't say anything else. The bus driver sort of looked at me and shrugged his shoulders as well. And it felt like being gaslit. Obviously there was a problem. He was not intervening. And so I, 25-year-old nobody, hustled my ass across the parking lot to try to follow this lady as I thought about what to do. I called my mom, of all people, and was like, "Mom, what do I do in this situation? Am I supposed to call 911? I don't know if this woman's okay. I don't want to approach her because she doesn't seem... I don't know what that looks like to people. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble if I try to do something here." But she was not available, and so I went to voicemail, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? I called a friend who was the head of a social services organization, and she didn't really know what to do, and so I called Safe House, and they were like, well, you have to, she has to call herself, you can't just call in for somebody else. And so eventually I called the 911 non-emergency line and said, "Hey, I see this woman who is not doing very, very well. What do I do? She's at this place," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, "Okay, we'll send somebody by when we can." Unfortunately, in the time it took for me to go through all of those options, I lost sight of the woman, and to this day do not know what happened to her. But when you go to somebody for help who has the power to intervene in a situation, and they treat somebody who is way more vulnerable than yourself as if they are expendable or don't matter, or as if they'll figure it out, it is very hard then to even think of them as an option when you yourself are feeling vulnerable. A lot of the problems that I have with policing in our city don't have to do with the literal things that they do. It's great that they stop crime. Ann Arbor's a pretty safe place. I feel very comfortable walking around here. But you could get better customer service at a fast food restaurant. And if I feel like that, I feel like the standard is so incredibly low. And that is something, I don't know how you change that, how you enforce respect or courtesy or even the smallest semblance of care, but that is something that I feel like needs to change if we are to feel like we can trust the police.
Thank you so much.
I don't think I used all my 5 minutes. I just wanted to respond to this optimistic notion. I'm in my 7th decade of being a black woman in America. There's no reason for me to be optimistic about police relations with black people based on my experiences. I remember where in certain places in this country, the police and the Klan were the same. I know that every black man who means anything to me has been disrespected by the police. So I'm hopeful. I am determined. I pray for my young sisters. I'm hopeful. But I want people to understand there's no reason for me to be optimistic based on who I am. And that's part of what we have to understand as well, where we're all coming from. I just want respect, and I haven't seen it. Thank you.
No, thank you. You know, it's funny. I think sometimes some people sort of discount their own interactions with the police, and maybe we normalize them. I remember getting pulled over by the police when I was a new driver, like 16 years old, because, girl, you too fine to be driving. Lights and sirens. I was terrified, right? And it sounds cute. It's not cute, though. That's horrific, to be pulled over by the police and realize with a badge and a gun that they have the ability to impact what you're going to do. I got pulled over in Ann Arbor with a friend who was, I'm sure you're not going to believe this, even sassier than me. And you should believe it. And the guy asked me, do you want to go out? Right on Stadium. And I was like, and I probably was speeding. I'm sure I was going 5 over. That's what he said. He's probably right. And my mouth was open, and my friend was like, no, she doesn't want to go out with you. And he was like, well, here's your ticket then. and you know, I don't even think about those things as being, those are really problematic, right? As a woman, I mean, it doesn't matter. I guess it could be anybody. But I mean, I think we discount those things. I've had those experiences. I certainly gave both my kids, my son and my daughter, the talk. You know, we couldn't afford to buy them a third car. They drove my car. And so what are the consequences of driving this particular car around town as a teenager? What your friends do is not something you can do. All those kinds of things. And I think sometimes we normalize it. We just think that's how things have to be, and we don't think about the fact, we don't do enough imagining about what it would be like to not have that talk with your child. To not have that talk. My husband drove around for a month with an expired driver's license. Oh my gosh, this thing expired. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you could get pulled over and you'll be under the jail. Like, if you make it to jail, what are we doing? And so I think we have to be realistic. Optimism, not necessary. Realism is important. But that means thinking about the very real things that have happened and thinking about them in their correct context and understanding that abusive things are abusive and not just sort of thinking, well, at least I wasn't shot. I mean, because that's what happens. Anybody else? Please.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Arya Shugat. When I was younger, I had an incident with the police when I was just 14 years old. I punched my father and broke his lip. The police were called. They handcuffed me and threatened to tase me against the wall. A month before, or sometime beforehand, they had cuffed another person that I went to school with and tased them, and it made their heart stop. This struck fear into me, knowing this. After I was uncuffed, I was told that I was a menace to society and that I needed to be dealt with. So I do not trust the police, but I understand that the trust in the police is something that a community has to deal with. More so, a crime was committed upon me last month, around April 12th. And I am unable to go to the police about it because I am a black person who also happens to be trans, and I do not feel that my rights would be respected, and I do not believe that I would get the results that I deserve. And so I now have to continue my life getting no closure from this moment and unable to interact with certain parts of this city because of what happened. So we need more to be done to increase police and community trust. but more so, we are the only ones that protect ourselves if the police cannot be there to protect us. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lynn Song. I'm also on City Council representing Ward 2. I'll keep it brief. I've got a little one who just broke her wrist from skateboarding, but she insists that I say something. So the past couple of months, I've been having some, I've been talking to my children about the violence being committed against Asian Americans around the country, connecting that to, I've brought my children on Black Lives Matter marches. We talk about race, we talk about incarceration, we talk about the uneven impacts across different communities, and we talk about what justice means and what justice can look like. For people like me, I'm Vietnamese American. 1 year death anniversaries are really important in my culture. So 1 year anniversaries is when we honor our ancestors. We set up an altar with their picture. We light incense, and we pray. We pray for forgiveness. We pray for blessings. And what I teach my children when we do, when we commemorate and remember our ancestors during Lunar New Year or death anniversaries, we talk about who these people were in our lives. So today I explained to my daughters that this is the 1 year death anniversary for George Floyd. So we should remember him. We should know that he was a father. We should know that he changed our country. We should know his name, just like how she goes to Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. So I hope folks are having the same discussions with their children as they struggle to understand what's going on in this country. It shouldn't take the point of death and violence against people of color to have this discussion in the first place. And I hope people really take this opportunity to connect these dots historically, politically, and be brave about it, because I expect this of my children. I expect them to support their peers, to be good allies, to be informed, to read, ask tough questions of adults. She campaigned with me last year during the pandemic. And even when people said, I would never vote for a person that looks like you, she was right behind me, and people still said that to my face. Or when they saw my campaign signs and said, White Lives Matter. My children, they heard it, and they saw me react. And I had to say, I don't think we're gonna agree on this. And you probably won't vote for me, but I'm just gonna move on. So I hope folks are examples for the next generation. I don't want my daughter or her peers to be afraid. I want them to be hopeful. I want them to fight for what's right. I want them to be able to watch city council meetings and feel that their families are represented. My children watch the commissions that I'm on, because we're home together, and I try to be a good example for them in the language that I use and the work that I try to do in City Council. I helped bring forth the Unarmed response resolution that doesn't necessarily have to sit with police. In other communities, it's with fire. As a social worker, I hope we can be innovative and think about how do we connect a continuum of care for folks. So I hope everyone here and everyone watching will help me get this message out. To help our community members, you need to know 211 is the United Way's call number. So if folks need shelter, care, food assistance, 211. ICPOC, you should know how to reach out to ICPOC. We should have alternatives to call when we need help, right? And this is something that I communicate with folks in my ward and the Asian American community who are reluctant to engage police. So you can also engage the Human Rights Commission. It shouldn't be up to ICPOC to create flyers and put the flyers on buses, and for these folks in their spare time outside of their jobs to get the message out about the work that they do in their free time volunteering about ICPOC. Everyone in our community should know about ICPOC, the Human Rights Commission, 211. So if we care, then we inform folks, get involved, and help folks get the help that they need. It doesn't have to. I hope that we can become a safer community, a more anti-racist community, and a community that actually cares. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Song. Anybody else?
No, she could do it again. No, she never called me back. She's my counsel.
I was like, did I not call you back?
No, she didn't. She's my counsel.
Yes.
My name is Chuck Laux. I guess I'm a political activist. I live in the First Ward. You know, my dad used to be on the city council of Saginaw back in the 70s. I grew up there, and I came further south to work in the auto industry. But when I was a kid at 16, my dad was on the council. I mean, we had a lot of issues with the cops back then. And at that age, I came up with a joke. It goes like this. The suspect was arrested for interfering with a police officer in the process of swinging a nightstick. So I kind of got a sense back then that the cops, when they do show up, they oftentimes take a bad situation and make it a lot worse. And I continue to believe that to this day. I think the key to helping improve our society is less police enforcement, less contact with the police. You know, they're oftentimes called into a situation and they make it far worse. That's definitely the case with Arya Shugat. If the cop had been negligent and not done his duty that night, she would probably still be alive. So, there we go. There's an example. Less police, less enforcement, less contact with the public. That should be the metric. The police, their metrics for how successful they are is how many people they send to jail. How many lives they ruin. That has to end, I think. We don't need the police. And a lot of times it's not the police's fault. The individual officer, that's another problem I've noticed. We blame the officer for the problem, when in fact it's the system that made the laws. The system with the command structure that's almost never accountable. You know, we blame officers for all these bad results. Individual officers, they have no power to change anything. I think we have to focus at the highest levels of society, whenever we can, as high up as we can go, changing the laws. I saw on the news, on TV, the woman in February in Detroit who had her car impounded because she couldn't afford the insurance. And the cop made a rather rude, racist comment towards her. He was a white police officer, black woman, city of Detroit. She had to walk home. You know, what escaped people's attention was the cop was crude and rude, but the law that he was enforcing was even worse. It took this woman's car away from her in the middle of winter because the insurance system in this state is designed to benefit insurance companies. It's not designed to really benefit us. And this cop was on the position of having to enforce this awful law. And I think you can blame that. So, once again, if that cop hadn't been doing his job, I think it would have been an improvement. This woman was probably the breadwinner of her household. She probably had to get to work. She probably had a lot of responsibilities. And taking her car away in one of the coldest Februarys that I can remember is probably one of the worst things that could have happened to her. So that's my feeling about how we need to focus on things. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's 8 o'clock and we try to be timely all the time. I want to thank you all so much for coming out. It means a lot to see people who've come because I asked you to, and people who came that we don't know, please stay in touch with us. The cards that you have show you how to file a police complaint if you're interested. If you know somebody who might need to, you can always do that anonymously even. But they also have our email address on it as well, so please reach out. We're happy to keep you informed. And so thank you so much for attending our public forum. Please stay in touch. Please watch out for us at council meetings, and our meeting is always the fourth Tuesday of the month as well. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Little thing. No deal. Thank you, Lisa.
Good job, guys.
Oh God! Oh God! Bonnie, thank you.